They thought they were unstoppable. They thought no one would dare to challenge them, but they had no idea who they were messing with. A simple night takes a shocking turn when two unexpected heroes step in. What happens next will leave you speechless. Watch till the end. Hit that like button, subscribe, and tell us where you're watching from. The warm glow of the setting sun bathed the small southern town in hues of gold and amber. The evening air carried the inviting scent of grilled burgers and fresh fries from a well-known diner that had stood at the heart of the town for decades. The streets bustled with activity, families enjoying their evening out, truckers taking a break from long hauls, and groups of locals sharing stories on the sidewalks. The diner's neon sign flickered, casting a soft glow over the wide parking lot where cars, motorcycles, and trucks lined up in neat rows. Among the vehicles parked near the entrance, one car stood out, a bright yellow Ford Mustang, its polished surface reflecting the warm evening light. The muscle car was an unmistakable symbol of power, speed, and style, drawing the eyes of passers-by. For one young man standing outside the diner, the car wasn't just impressive, it was mesmerizing. The young man, a lean black teenager in his late teens, worked as a cleaner at the diner. He had spent the last few minutes sweeping near the entrance, but his gaze kept drifting toward the Mustang. His hands gripped the broom absent-mindedly as he admired the sleek curves of the vehicle, the bold stripes running down the center, the way the rims gleamed under the streetlights. It was the kind of car he had only seen in magazines, the kind of car that people dreamed of owning. The distant rumble of an engine broke his trance. A black SUV rolled smoothly into the lot, parking a few spaces away from the Mustang. The doors opened, and out stepped two towering figures, both exuding an aura of strength and confidence that was impossible to ignore. John Cena and Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. Even in their casual attire, Cena in his signature jean shorts and a tight-fitting t-shirt, and Dwayne in a fitted black polo and athletic joggers, they carried an undeniable presence. They had just wrapped up a massive wrestling event, a night of roaring crowds and adrenaline-pumping performances, and now they were here for one simple reason: to grab some food at Cena's favorite diner. As they approached the entrance, Cena caught the young man's gaze, noticing how his eyes kept flicking toward the Mustang. A small smile tugged at the corner of his lips. "You like it?" Cena asked, nodding toward the car. The young man looked startled, as if he hadn't expected to be spoken to. He hesitated for a second, then nodded vigorously. "Yeah, it's incredible. The engine must be insane, right?" Cena chuckled. "Oh yeah, she's got a beast under the hood, handles like a dream, too." The young man's face lit up. "Man, I've only ever seen cars like that in magazines. Never thought I'd be standing this close to one." Dwayne exchanged a look with Cena, amused by the conversation. Cena studied the young man for a moment, as if contemplating something. Then, with a slight smirk, he reached into his pocket, pulled out the keys to the Mustang, and held them out. "Go ahead," Cena said. "Take it for a spin. Just don't go full speed, all right?" The young man's eyes widened in disbelief. "Wait, you're serious?" Dwayne let out a low chuckle. "He's serious. You gonna stand there or take the chance of a lifetime?" The teenager's hands shook slightly as he took the keys, gripping them as if they were made of gold. I won't mess it up, I swear." Cena patted his shoulder. "I trust you. Just one lap around the lot, all right? And enjoy it." The kid nodded eagerly, moving toward the car with the same careful excitement as someone about to touch a priceless artifact. As he slid into the driver's seat, his fingers trembled against the steering wheel. The Mustang felt unreal beneath his touch. The smell of leather, the smooth feel of the gear shift, the sheer power humming in the engine. He took a deep breath and turned the key. The Mustang roared to life. Cena and Dwayne watched from the diner's entrance as the car rolled forward smoothly, the young man steering carefully, his face a mixture of concentration and sheer joy. The engine purred as he took a slow lap around the parking lot, the headlights illuminating the pavement as the Mustang moved like a graceful beast. Dwayne chuckled, shaking his head. Man, I remember being that age, seeing cars like that and dreaming about what it'd be like to drive one. Cena nodded. Yeah, I figured, why not let the kid have that moment? They turned and headed inside the diner. The bell above the door jingled as they stepped in, the warm air carrying the scent of grilled patties and sizzling bacon. Inside, the atmosphere was lively. Waitresses moving between booths, the clinking of plates, and the occasional burst of laughter from customers enjoying their meals. The two wrestlers made their way to the counter, exchanging greetings with the staff. Cena was a regular here, and the owner, a middle-aged man with a thick southern accent, grinned as he approached them. Well, well, look who's back, the owner said. Cena, I should start naming a burger after you with how often you show up. Cena laughed. You should, and while you're at it, put Dwayne's name on a side of fries. Dwayne smirked. I'd prefer a whole steak, but I'll take it. The owner laughed and took their orders. As they waited, they continued to chat, completely unaware of the trouble brewing just outside. Because while they sat inside, enjoying the casual conversation, a storm was rolling into the parking lot. A distant rumble of motorcycles grew louder. The soft hum of laughter and conversation inside the diner masked the ominous sound of multiple bikes pulling into the lot. The deep rumble of motorcycles filled the evening air as a pack of riders rolled into the diner's parking lot. Their chrome-plated bikes gleamed under the streetlights, their engines growling like wild beasts ready to pounce. The gang moved in unison, their black leather jackets adorned with a red Thunderbolt insignia, the unmistakable mark of the Thunder Riders, a local biker gang notorious for stirring trouble wherever they went. At the head of the group was Rick Thunder Matthews, a broad-shouldered man with a shaved head and a thick goatee that framed his perpetual scowl. Rick pulled his motorcycle into a hard stop near the Mustang, his boots scraping against the pavement as he dismounted. His sharp eyes scanned the lot, assessing the vehicles parked nearby until they landed on the bright yellow muscle car idling near the entrance. His expression darkened, his lips curling into a sneer. His second-in-command, Pitt Scar Jenkins, stepped up beside him. Damn, Pitt muttered, running a gloved hand over the Mustang's sleek body. Somebody's riding high tonight. This thing's worth a fortune. Rick cracked his knuckles, his irritation evident. And it sure as hell ain't his, he growled, nodding toward the young black teenager sitting behind the wheel. The gang followed his gaze, their expressions twisting into amusement and disdain. The teenager had just finished his lap around the lot and was carefully steering the Mustang back toward its original spot when he caught sight of the bikers. His grip on the wheel tightened. Something about their stance, the way they stared at him, made his stomach clench. "Yo, kid," Rick called out, stepping forward. His voice was smooth, almost casual, but there was an unmistakable edge of menace beneath it. "Nice ride. Where'd you steal it?" The teenager's heart pounded. "I didn't steal it," he said quickly. "It's not mine. I was just—" Rick cut him off with a short laugh. "Right. Let me guess. Some kind stranger just handed you the keys to a damn Mustang and said, 'Have fun, kid.'" A few of the bikers chuckled, but there was no humor in their laughter, only malice. The teenager swallowed hard. "Yeah, that's exactly what happened." Rick's smirk faltered. He stepped closer, resting one tattooed hand on the roof of the car. "You expect me to believe that?" The teenager nodded, trying to keep his voice steady. "John Cena gave me the keys. He's inside. You can ask him." Rick's expression twisted in disbelief, then amusement. "John Cena?" He glanced at Pitt, then back at the others. "You hear that, boys? The kid thinks we're stupid enough to believe John Cena let him take a joyride in this thing." Pitt shook his head, grinning. "That's a good one. Kid's got imagination." The teenager felt a cold sweat creeping down his neck. "Look, I don't want any trouble. I'll just park it and—" Rick slammed his palm onto the hood, silencing him. The sudden noise made the teenager flinch. "Oh, there's no trouble," Rick said smoothly. "Just a little lesson." The bikers moved in closer, their presence suffocating. The teenager's instincts screamed at him to run, but his feet felt like they were made of lead. Rick turned to Pitt and gestured toward the car. "What do you think? Think we should teach the kid what happens when you lie?" Pitt grinned and pulled a switchblade from his pocket, flicking it open with a practiced ease. "Sounds like a good idea." The teenager's pulse hammered in his ears. "No, please. I swear I didn't steal it." Rick ignored him. He grabbed the side mirror and yanked, ripping it clean off. The teenager gasped. "Oops," Rick said mockingly. "Guess that wasn't built too strong." The other bikers took that as their cue to join in. Pitt dragged his switchblade along the Mustang's side, leaving a deep, jagged scratch across the once pristine paint. Another biker, Johnny Nail Thompson, picked up a rock from the lot and hurled it at the windshield. The glass shattered on impact, sending a spiderweb of cracks across the entire pane. The teenager jumped out of the car, throwing himself between the bikers and the vehicle. "Stop! Please! It's not mine!" Rick shoved him back, making him stumble. "Move, kid, or do you want to get hurt too?" The teenager didn't move, his fists clenched at his sides as he shook his head. "I can't let you do this." Rick raised an eyebrow, then let out a sharp laugh. "Look at this little hero, trying to protect a car that ain't even his." The laughter spread among the gang, but it was a cruel, mocking sound. The teenager refused to back down, even though his entire body trembled. Pitt moved forward. "Maybe the kid needs a little encouragement," he said, raising the switchblade threateningly. The teenager braced himself. Then a voice cut through the night like a thunderclap. "Hey!" The bikers froze mid-motion, their heads snapping toward the diner's entrance. The double doors swung open and two massive figures stepped into the parking lot, their shadows stretching long across the pavement. John Cena. Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. Cena's jaw was tight, his usual easygoing demeanor nowhere to be seen. His eyes locked onto the wrecked Mustang, then flicked to the teenager standing defensively in front of it. Dwayne rolled his shoulders, his gaze cold and unforgiving. "Well," he muttered, shaking his head, "looks like we walked out just in time." Rick recovered quickly, his stance shifting into one of defiance. He crossed his arms and sneered. "Well, well, if it isn't the world-famous muscleheads. You two just passing through, or is this your business?" Cena stepped forward, his gaze dark. "You just wrecked my car," he said. His voice was calm, too calm, the kind of calm that preceded a storm. Rick scoffed. "Yeah? So what? You think your name makes you untouchable?" Dwayne let out a low chuckle, but there was no humor in it. "I think," he said, "you just made the worst mistake of your life." Rick's grin didn't waver. He took a step closer, trying to maintain control of the situation. "You don't scare me, big guy." Cena's expression didn't change. He just took another slow step forward, his massive frame towering over Rick's. "I should," Cena said. The air in the parking lot had shifted. The bikers, once so cocky and full of bravado, shifted uncomfortably. They weren't dealing with just anyone. They were facing two of the most powerful men to ever step inside a wrestling ring, and they had just given them a reason to be angry. Rick saw the shift too, but his pride refused to let him back down. He rolled his neck and motioned to his men. "Guess we'll just have to teach you boys a lesson." Pitt pulled a length of metal chain from his belt, wrapping it around his knuckles. Johnny Nail flexed his fingers, gripping a crowbar. Cena and Dwayne, they just smirked. "Go ahead," Dwayne said. "Make our night." The parking lot was silent for a brief moment, the tension thick enough to choke the air. The neon lights of the diner flickered, casting long shadows over the cracked pavement. The smell of motor oil, burnt rubber, and cigarette smoke hung heavy as the Thunder Riders squared up against John Cena and Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. The bikers, who just moments ago were full of smug confidence, now found themselves staring at two of the most physically imposing men in the world. But, despite the shift in the air, Rick Thunder Matthews refused to back down. His pride, his reputation, and his dominance over this town were on the line. He couldn't afford to look weak in front of his crew. Rick took a step forward, sizing up Cena, who stood perfectly still, arms relaxed at his sides, but there was an undeniable intensity in his stare. "You think you scare me?" Rick sneered, rolling his shoulders, his voice filled with forced bravado. "You're just another musclehead who thinks the world bends to him. Well, not here. This is my town." Cena didn't flinch. He simply tilted his head slightly, his eyes narrowing. "Your town?" he asked, his voice quiet but firm. "Then maybe you should start acting like you deserve it." Rick's jaw clenched. He turned his gaze to the young man who still stood behind the wrecked Mustang, his fists clenched at his sides, his chest rising and falling rapidly. "This little punk," Rick spat, pointing at him, "thought he could sit in a car that doesn't belong to him. Thought he could just pretend to be something he's not." Dwayne let out a slow breath, shaking his head. "See, now that's where you messed up," he muttered. He stepped forward, his sheer size making Rick and the others take a subconscious step back. "This isn't about a car. It's about respect. And you just showed the whole damn world that you don't have any." Rick smirked, trying to hide the fact that his body was tensing. "Respect?" he scoffed. "Respect is earned." Cena exhaled sharply, his patience wearing thin. He looked at Rick with a steady, unreadable expression. "You're right," Cena said, "and I think it's time you earned some." That was the last thing Rick wanted to hear. He lunged forward, swinging at Cena with a wild haymaker. Cena saw it coming a mile away. With fluid precision, he sidestepped, grabbed Rick by the wrist and twisted it, forcing him into a quick spin before slamming him chest first against the hood of the Mustang. Rick let out a choked grunt, his face contorted in shock as Cena kept him pinned. The rest of the bikers reacted instantly. Pitt, Scar Jenkins charged at Dwayne, swinging a chain like a whip, aiming for his ribs. Dwayne ducked the first swing, caught the chain midair with his left hand, and with a powerful yank, sent Pitt flying forward, crashing hard onto the pavement. Johnny Nail Thompson let out a yell and swung a crowbar at Cena's head. Cena caught it mid-swing, twisting it out of Johnny's grip with pure strength. Before Johnny could react, Cena brought his knee up into his gut, knocking the wind out of him before tossing him aside like a rag doll. The parking lot erupted into chaos. Rick struggled against Cena's grip, using his free hand to elbow him in the ribs. It was enough of a distraction for Rick to break free, stumbling backward, his face twisted with rage. He reached down, pulling a switchblade from his pocket, flicking it open with a sharp, metallic click. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life," Rick snarled. Dwayne, who had just sent another biker sprawling with a heavy right hook, turned in time to see Rick lunging at Cena with the blade. "Watch it," Dwayne called out. Cena was already in motion. With lightning reflexes, he caught Rick's wrist just inches before the knife could make contact. He squeezed hard. Rick let out a strangled sound of pain as Cena bent his wrist back, forcing him to drop the blade onto the pavement with a clatter. Rick desperately swung his free hand, trying to land a punch, but Cena ducked and countered with a swift clothesline, sending Rick crashing onto the ground. Meanwhile, Bob, the Bull Myers, the largest of the gang, grabbed Dwayne from behind, attempting to put him in a chokehold. It was a mistake. Dwayne stomped hard on Bob's foot, breaking free from the hold, and before Bob could react, Dwayne grabbed him by the collar and lifted him off his feet, slamming him into the side of a parked truck with a thunderous crash. The remaining bikers hesitated now, watching their leader and strongest members being systematically taken apart. Some still had their fists clenched, but the confidence was draining from their expressions. Rick groaned and tried to push himself up, but Cena stepped forward and planted a boot on his chest, keeping him pinned to the pavement. "Stay down," Cena warned. Rick looked up, his face contorted in fury. You don't get it," he spat. "This isn't over." Dwayne turned, looking at the scattered bikers around them. "Yeah, it is." For a long moment, nothing moved. The Thunder Riders were either sprawled out on the pavement or staggering back toward their bikes, holding bruised ribs and busted lips. Rick, humiliated and beaten, lay under Cena's boot, his pride in tatters. Finally, Rick shoved Cena's foot off his chest and staggered to his feet. He wiped blood from the corner of his mouth and glared at the two wrestlers. His hands trembled, not from fear, but from the sheer rage of knowing he had lost. Without another word, Rick turned and stumbled toward his motorcycle. One by one, the rest of the gang followed, limping and cursing under their breath. Engines roared to life, and in a matter of seconds the Thunder Riders were gone, their taillights disappearing into the night. The silence that followed was deafening. Cena and Dwayne exhaled almost in unison. Cena looked down at the broken side mirror, the scratched paint, and the shattered windshield of his beloved Mustang. He sighed. "Man, this is gonna cost me." Dwayne let out a low chuckle, rolling his shoulders. "Yeah, but look at the bright side." Cena raised an eyebrow. "What's the bright side?" Dwayne smirked. "We got a free workout." Cena let out a short laugh, shaking his head. He turned to the young man who still stood frozen in place, his wide eyes bouncing between the two wrestlers. "You okay, kid?" Cena asked. The teenager nodded slowly. "That was the craziest thing I've ever seen." Dwayne patted the young man's shoulder. "Welcome to a normal Tuesday night for us." Cena ran a hand over his Mustang's dented hood, exhaling heavily. "Guess we're walking home." The kid hesitated before reaching into his pocket and pulling out the Mustang's keys. He held them out. I think these belong to you." Cena took the keys, his expression softening. "You did good, kid. You tried to stand your ground. That's not easy." The teenager swallowed. "I thought I was going to get wrecked." Dwayne grinned. They were the ones who got wrecked. The three of them stood there for a moment, the night air cool against their skin. The fight was over. Justice had been served. Cena pocketed the keys and turned back toward the diner. "Let's get some food." Dwayne nodded. "Yeah, and I'm getting extra fries after this." Together, the three walked back inside, leaving behind the wrecked Mustang as a testament to the lesson that had been delivered that night. The neon lights of the diner flickered against the backdrop of a quiet parking lot that only minutes ago had been a battlefield. The Mustang stood damaged but not defeated, its windshield cracked, its side mirror shattered, its once flawless yellow paint now marred by deep scratches and dents. The air still carried the faint scent of burning rubber and gasoline, but the true storm had already passed. The Thunder Riders had fled into the night, their pride as broken as the car they had tried to destroy. Inside the diner, John Cena, Dwayne Johnson, and the young man sat in a booth near the window. The kid, still reeling from the adrenaline of the encounter, could barely touch his food. His hands rested on the edge of the table, his fingers drumming nervously. Cena, in contrast, was halfway through a double cheeseburger while Dwayne sipped his milkshake like nothing out of the ordinary had happened. "You're still shaking," Cena observed, glancing at the young man with a small smirk. "You good?" The kid let out a shaky laugh and exhaled. I don't know, man. That was—" He shook his head. "I mean, I thought they were going to kill me." Dwayne set his shake down and leaned forward slightly. "They weren't going to kill you," he said calmly, "but they wanted you scared. That's what guys like them do. They survive off fear. They make people afraid, so no one stands up to them." The kid nodded slowly. "I guess it worked. I was terrified." Cena chuckled, wiping his hands with a napkin. "Yeah, but you didn't run, did you?" The young man hesitated, thinking about it. He had stood his ground. Even when his legs had trembled, even when his instincts had screamed at him to run, he had stayed. "No," he admitted, "I didn't." Dwayne smiled. "That's something a lot of people can't do." The waiter came by, refilling their drinks and placing another basket of fries in front of them. Cena grabbed a handful, popping one into his mouth before pointing a finger at the kid. "Let me tell you something about guys like Rick and his crew," Cena said between bites. "They talk big, act big, but when someone pushes back, really pushes back, they crumble." Dwayne nodded in agreement. "They lost tonight. Not just the fight, but their control over this place. They thought they owned this town. But what did they do the second things didn't go their way?" The young man looked up. "They ran." Cena snapped his fingers and pointed at him. "Exactly." The kid processed the words, his fingers finally gripping the fork beside his plate. "But won't they come back? I mean, they don't seem like the kind of guys that let things go." Dwayne exhaled, stretching his arms out in front of him. "Maybe," he admitted. "Guys like that, they hate losing, but if they're smart, they'll cut their losses and let it go." Cena smirked. "And if they're not smart, well, I don't mind a round two." The kid chuckled at that, shaking his head. "Man, I don't know how you guys do it. I thought wrestlers just fought in the ring." Dwayne shrugged. "Sometimes life throws you a different kind of fight." The door to the diner suddenly swung open, and for a split second the kid's stomach clenched as he feared the worst, that Rick and his crew had already come back for revenge. But instead, a single figure stepped inside. It was Danny, the youngest member of the Thunder Riders. Unlike earlier, when he had stood beside Rick with misplaced confidence, now he looked uneasy, his hands shoved deep into the pockets of his jacket. He scanned the diner until he spotted Cena, Dwayne, and the kid sitting together, then cautiously approached. Cena set his drink down and leaned back in his seat. "Well, well," he said, "look who it is." Danny stopped a few feet from their table, shifting on his feet. I just wanted to say something." Dwayne raised an eyebrow. "We're listening." Danny glanced around the diner as if expecting Rick or one of the other bikers to suddenly appear and drag him away. He sighed and rubbed the back of his neck. I didn't want to do any of that," he admitted. "I mean, yeah, I rolled with them, but I never signed up for that. Wrecking someone's car, threatening some kid." He hesitated before looking directly at the young man. "I'm sorry, man. I didn't touch your car, I swear, but I didn't stop them either. That's on me." The kid stared at him for a long moment, trying to gauge if the apology was real. It was. Dwayne studied Danny with a careful gaze. "So, why were you with them in the first place?" Danny hesitated, then shrugged. "I don't know. Maybe because they made me feel like I belonged somewhere." Cena nodded. "Yeah, that's how guys like Rick work. They don't find the strongest guys. They find the ones looking for something, belonging, power, respect, and they twist it." Danny swallowed hard. "Well, I'm done with them. After tonight, I don't think I can go back." Dwayne leaned forward slightly. "Then don't." Danny blinked at him. "Just like that?" "Just like that," Cena echoed. "You already made the hardest decision, to walk away. That's more than most people can do." Danny let out a slow breath, nodding. "Thanks, I guess." He glanced at the kid again, hesitated, then added, "And, sorry again about the car." The kid exhaled and nodded back. "It's not my car, but yeah, thanks." Danny gave one last nod before turning toward the door. Before he could step outside, Cena called out, "Danny?" Danny turned back, waiting. Cena tossed something in the air, a set of keys. Danny caught them, frowning. "What's this?" Cena smirked. "That busted-up motorcycle one of your guys left behind when he ran? Pretty sure no one's coming back for it. Call it your fresh start." Danny looked down at the keys in his hand, then back up at Cena, his eyes widening slightly. He swallowed, nodding again before stepping outside into the cool night. Dwayne watched him go, then turned back to Cena. "You sure about that?" Cena shrugged, taking another bite of his burger. "He's got a choice now. Let's see what he does with it." The kid leaned back in his seat, exhaling slowly. The fear that had been gripping him all night had finally begun to fade. "Tonight was crazy," he muttered. "I don't think I'll ever forget it." Dwayne grinned. "Some nights stick with you." Cena stretched his arms behind his head. "So, kid, what are you going to do now?" The kid considered the question, then smirked slightly. "First, I'm going to finish my damn fries." Dwayne chuckled, raising his milkshake in a mock toast. Cena smirked and nodded. The three of them sat there in the booth, eating, talking, and letting the weight of the night finally lift off their shoulders. Outside, the parking lot was quiet. No more bikers, no more threats. Just the sound of the neon sign buzzing softly against the backdrop of a southern town that had just witnessed a shift in power. Justice had been served, respect had been restored, and a new chapter had begun. The night had settled into a strange stillness outside the diner. The neon sign flickered softly, casting an eerie glow over the battered Mustang still parked near the entrance. Inside, the tension had faded, replaced by the comfortable hum of conversation. John Cena and Dwayne Johnson sat in the booth, finishing their meal, while the young man leaned back in his seat, finally letting the reality of the night sink in. He had stood up to a gang of bikers, witnessed two wrestling legends take them down, and somehow walked away from it all with a story he would never forget. Cena wiped his hands on a napkin, glancing at the kid. "So, kid, that was one hell of a night." The young man exhaled, shaking his head. "You can say that again. I still can't believe you just let me drive your car like that. Cena smirked. Well, technically, you parked it for me. Guess I should have mentioned the biker gang destruction insurance before handing you the keys. Dwayne let out a low chuckle, sipping his shake. Yeah, I don't think that's a real policy, but after tonight, maybe it should be. The young man finally cracked a small smile. Still, I appreciate it, even if, he motioned to the Mustang outside, its ruined windshield glinting under the streetlights. Cena sighed, shaking his head. Yeah, I'm really starting to regret letting you drive it. The kid's face dropped. Wait, are you serious? Dwayne grinned, elbowing Cena. Relax, he's messing with you. Cena smirked. Yeah, I wouldn't blame you even if I was serious. Rick and his guys were looking for a reason to start something tonight. You just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. The young man nodded, his expression thoughtful. Still, you guys didn't have to step in. You could have just walked away. Dwayne leaned forward slightly, his expression serious now. That's not how it works, kid. When you see something wrong happening, you've got two choices. Walk away and pretend it's not your problem, or step in and do something about it. The kid let that sink in for a moment before nodding. Yeah, makes sense. The door to the diner suddenly swung open. The three of them turned their heads instinctively, expecting trouble. But instead, it was the diner manager, a stout man in his late 50s with a thick mustache and a concerned look on his face. He walked straight to their booth, rubbing the back of his neck. Fellas, the manager said hesitantly, we might have a little situation. Cena sat up straighter. What kind of situation? The manager gestured toward the parking lot. That gang, the Thunder Riders, they're back. The young man stiffened. Dwayne and Cena exchanged a look before turning their heads toward the diner's front windows. Outside, under the dim glow of the street lights, the unmistakable sound of motorcycles filled the air once again. The low growl of multiple engines sent a chill through the diner. Dwayne sighed. Great. Guess they weren't smart enough to leave it alone. Cena cracked his knuckles. They just don't learn, do they? The young man swallowed hard. Should we call the cops? The manager frowned. Phones are down. I think those guys cut the lines before pulling in. Cena let out a slow breath. Figures. Rick's the kind of guy who doesn't like losing. Dwayne slid out of the booth, his movements deliberate. All right, let's go handle this. Cena stood up, tossing a few bills onto the table. Stay inside, kid, he told the young man. This isn't your fight. The kid hesitated. He wanted to protest, wanted to say that he wasn't going to hide while they handled everything, but deep down he knew he was out of his league. So he nodded. Cena and Dwayne walked toward the door. The air outside was thick with tension as the motorcycles came to a stop. The Thunder Riders had returned, and they weren't alone. Rick Thunder Matthews stood at the front of the pack, but this time he had brought reinforcements. A dozen more bikers sat astride their motorcycles, their faces shadowed under their helmets. The parking lot, once empty, was now packed with revving engines and glaring headlights. The sound of boots hitting the pavement as bikers dismounted sent an ominous signal through the air. Rick stepped forward, his knuckles still bruised from the earlier fight. He locked eyes with Cena and smirked. Thought you'd seen the last of us? Cena let out a slow breath. Nah, I figured you'd come back. Some guys just don't know when to quit. Rick spread his arms dramatically. See, you humiliated me in front of my crew, in front of this whole damn town. I can't let that stand. Dwayne chuckled. You sure? Looked like you ran off pretty quick earlier." A ripple of laughter spread through the diner patrons watching through the windows, but it only made Rick angrier. His nostrils flared. "Laugh it up, because this time you're outnumbered." Cena glanced around at the bikers, counting them. "Yeah, that's true." He then turned to Dwayne. "You worried?" Dwayne tilted his head, cracking his neck. "Not even a little." Rick's smirk faltered, but he quickly masked it with bravado. "Big mistake, boys." He raised his hand, giving a signal, and his bikers charged forward. Dwayne and Cena didn't wait. They met them head on. Cena sidestepped a biker swinging a tire iron, catching his wrist midair and twisting it before flipping the man onto his back with a single powerful motion. Another biker lunged at him, but Cena ducked low and drove his shoulder into the man's midsection, lifting him clean off the ground before slamming him onto the hood of a parked car. Dwayne, meanwhile, dodged a swinging chain, grabbed the attacker by the collar, and delivered a devastating rock bottom onto the pavement. Another biker tried to jump him from behind, but Dwayne simply back-elbowed him in the jaw, sending him sprawling. Rick roared in frustration and rushed Cena, throwing a wild punch. Cena caught it, twisting Rick's arm behind his back before shoving him into a nearby motorcycle, causing it to topple over. Rick groaned as he tried to recover. The battle in the parking lot was chaos. Bikers swung chains, tire irons, and fists, but Cena and Dwayne were too fast, too strong, too skilled. One by one, the bikers fell, some scrambling to retreat after seeing their comrades hit the pavement. Rick stumbled to his feet, blood trickling from his lip, rage burning in his eyes. "You think this is over?" he spat. "You think?" Before he could finish, Cena grabbed him by the collar and lifted him clean off the ground. Rick's eyes widened in panic as Cena flipped him onto his shoulders. With a roar, Cena delivered the attitude adjustment, sending Rick crashing onto the pavement with a thunderous impact. Rick didn't get up. The remaining bikers saw their leader crumpled on the ground and immediately lost their nerve. Engines roared as they scrambled onto their motorcycles and sped off into the night, leaving Rick behind. Dwayne exhaled, dusting off his hands. "You think they learned their lesson?" Cena looked down at Rick's motionless form, then at the empty parking lot. "If they haven't, they're beyond saving." Behind them, the diner door opened. The young man stepped out cautiously, eyes wide with disbelief. "You guys just took down a whole gang. Again." Dwayne smirked. "We like to stay in shape." Cena patted the kid's shoulder. "See? Told you some fights are worth stepping in for." The neon lights buzzed softly as the night air settled once again. Justice had been served, and the town was finally quiet. The sound of motorcycle engines had faded into the night, leaving behind only the low hum of the diner's neon sign and the occasional murmur from inside. The parking lot, once a battleground, was now eerily quiet. John Cena and Dwayne Johnson stood in the center of it, their breathing steady, their fists still clenched from the fight. Around them, the wreckage of the Thunder Riders' failed revenge attempt lay scattered, discarded weapons, toppled bikes, and, in the center of it all, Rick Thunder Matthews, sprawled on the pavement, groaning in pain. The young man stepped cautiously out of the diner, his eyes darting between the two wrestlers and the beaten gang leader. He still couldn't fully grasp what he had just witnessed. Is he dead?" he asked, nodding toward Rick. Cena shook his head, nudging Rick's shoulder lightly with his boot. "Nah, just reconsidering some life choices." Rick groaned and tried to lift himself off the ground, but his body refused to cooperate. He gritted his teeth, glaring up at Cena with whatever defiance he had left. You think you've won? He rasped. Dwayne crouched beside him, resting his forearms on his knees. His expression was calm but unreadable. Nah, he said, his voice level. Winning means the other guy actually had a chance. Rick seethed, his jaw tightening, but he had nothing left to say. He had been humiliated not once, but twice, and this time there was no crew left to back him up. The last of his bikers had abandoned him the second they saw him get slammed into the pavement. He was alone. The young man exhaled and crossed his arms. So, what now? You just let him go? Cena exchanged a glance with Dwayne, then shrugged. He's not our problem anymore. He made his choice. He lost. Dwayne stood up, looking down at Rick. And if he's smart, he'll take the hint and stay gone. Rick gritted his teeth, his pride refusing to let him fully accept defeat. He forced himself into a seated position, wiping blood from his busted lip. You don't get it, do you? He spat. This town belongs to me. Cena let out a slow breath and shook his head. Not anymore. Rick glared up at them, but something in his expression had shifted. The fire was still there, but it was flickering, unsteady. He knew he had lost control. The diner manager stepped outside, cautiously surveying the aftermath. He let out a low whistle, shaking his head. Damn, he muttered. That was something else. He looked at Rick, his usual nervous energy gone, replaced by a new confidence. You hear that, Matthews? He said. They're right. You don't run this town anymore. Rick clenched his jaw, his fingers curling into fists, but he didn't say a word. He couldn't. The manager looked back at Cena and Dwayne. Appreciate what you guys did tonight. Hell, this whole damn town probably does. Dwayne smirked. Least we could do. Food was good, by the way. The manager chuckled. On the house, least I can do for the two guys who just cleaned up our streets. Cena grinned. Now you're speaking my language. As the manager headed back inside, Cena turned to the young man, who was still watching Rick warily. What about you, kid? You all right? The young man hesitated, then nodded. Yeah, I think so. Dwayne clapped him on the back. You held your own tonight. Not a lot of people would have done that. The kid exhaled. I don't know if I was brave or just stupid. Cena smirked. Sometimes they're the same thing. Rick let out another groan, finally pushing himself onto his hands and knees. You're going to regret this, he muttered. Cena and Dwayne turned back to him, their expressions unreadable. Rick forced himself to his feet, swaying slightly, his bruised face twisted with hatred. This ain't over. Dwayne tilted his head slightly. You sure about that? Rick hesitated, his hands trembling at his sides. He wanted to keep fighting, to take back control, to make them pay, but deep down, he knew. He had lost. His shoulders slumped, and without another word, he turned and staggered toward his remaining bike. He climbed on, his movement sluggish, his pride shattered. The engine roared to life, and within seconds he was gone, disappearing into the night like a bad memory. The young man let out a long breath he hadn't realized he was holding. So, that's it? Cena nodded. That's it. Dwayne watched the road where Rick had vanished, then exhaled. At least for now. Cena turned back toward the Mustang, his face falling slightly at the sight of its wrecked state. He ran a hand over the scratched paint, shaking his head. Damn, this hurts. The young man grimaced. Yeah, sorry about that. Cena waved him off. Not your fault, just means I get a new paint job. Dwayne grinned. Maybe this time go with something less flashy? Cena shot him a look. You think I'd drive anything subtle? Dwayne chuckled. Fair point. The kid shifted on his feet. I just wanted to say thanks. You didn't have to step in, but you did. That means something." Cena patted his shoulder. "You stepped up too, kid. That means something." Dwayne nodded. "You got a good head on your shoulders. Just make sure you use it right." The young man swallowed and nodded. Cena stretched, rolling his shoulders. "All right, we need a ride. You got an Uber app?" The young man chuckled. "Yeah, I gotcha." Dwayne smirked. "First time I've ever seen John Cena ask for a ride. Historic moment." Cena laughed. "You want to carry me home, big guy?" Dwayne rolled his eyes. "Not a chance." The three of them stood there for a moment, the night finally settling into something peaceful. The air was cool, the town was quiet, and for the first time in a long time there were no bikers terrorizing the streets. Justice had been served. Cena exhaled, looking up at the stars. "Hell of a night." Dwayne nodded. "Hell of a night." And with that, they headed back toward the diner, leaving behind the battered Mustang and the memories of a battle well fought. The night had settled back into its usual rhythm. The distant sound of crickets filled the warm southern air, the town slowly winding down as the last of the diner's patrons trickled out. The neon sign buzzed softly, its light reflecting off the shattered glass and dented metal of John Cena's Mustang. The once pristine car had taken a beating, but it still stood as a symbol of something far greater than just a vehicle. It was a testament to a lesson learned, a fight won, and a town that would no longer be controlled by fear. Inside the diner, Cena, Dwayne, and the young man sat together, a sense of finality in the air. They had won. The Thunder Riders were broken, their leader humiliated, and the town was no longer under their shadow. The people inside the diner had started to relax again, the tension fading with every passing minute. Conversations returned to normal and life moved on. The young man sipped on a soda, his hands finally steady. He still couldn't believe what had happened in the past few hours. "I don't think I'll ever get used to this," he admitted. "One second, I'm sweeping the sidewalk, and the next, I'm in the middle of some action movie." Cena smirked, leaning back in his seat. "Welcome to our world, kid." Dwayne grinned. "Yeah, we don't really do normal." The young man shook his head, still in disbelief. "I thought for sure they'd kill me out there." Cena pointed at him. "But you didn't run." The kid hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, I didn't." Dwayne leaned forward, resting his forearms on the table. "That's the thing about moments like this. You never really know who you are until you're in the middle of the fire. And tonight, you proved something, to yourself and to them." The kid exhaled, thinking about that. "I guess." He glanced out the window, looking at the wrecked Mustang. "Still, I feel bad about your car." Cena shrugged. "Cars can be fixed." Dwayne smirked. "Yeah, but his ego? That's another story." Cena rolled his eyes. "Funny?" He turned back to the kid. "Seriously, though, don't beat yourself up over it. You didn't do this. Rick and his guys did. And tonight, they learned they can't just go around doing whatever they want." The young man nodded. "Yeah, and I learned something too." Dwayne raised an eyebrow. "Oh, yeah? What's that?" The kid took a deep breath and sat up a little straighter. "That standing your ground isn't about being fearless. It's about knowing what's worth fighting for." Cena and Dwayne exchanged a look, then Cena nodded approvingly. "Now you're getting it." The door to the diner swung open again, and the manager stepped out, wiping his hands on his apron. "You boys need anything else before I close up?" Cena smirked. "Yeah, how about a new car?" The manager chuckled. "Sorry, can't help you there, but I do got some good news. That little display out there, People saw it, and let's just say Rick Matthews ain't gonna be walking around like he owns this place anymore. Dwayne stretched his arms behind his head. Good. The guy needed to be taken down a peg. The manager nodded. Hell, if you ask me, he should have been run out of town years ago, but folks were scared. Not anymore. The young man listened carefully, feeling something stir in him. He had never really thought about it before, but maybe that was the real victory tonight. It wasn't just about a car or a fight. It was about changing something. Cena stood up, stretching. Well, I think our work here is done. He pulled out his phone and sighed. Now I just gotta find a way to get this thing towed. Dwayne smirked. Told you. Should have gone with something more subtle. Cena scoffed. And what, drive a minivan? Dwayne grinned. Hey, they're comfortable. The kid laughed as he stood up too. Guess I should get going. He hesitated for a moment, then looked at the two men. Seriously, thank you. Not just for stopping those guys, but for everything. Cena patted his shoulder. Any time, kid. Dwayne nodded. Just remember, life's always going to throw you in situations where you gotta make a choice. Make the right one. The young man smiled, feeling more confident than he had in a long time. He turned toward the door, but before he left, he glanced back one last time. Oh, and Cena? Cena raised an eyebrow. Yeah? The kid smirked. Maybe go with black next time. A little less noticeable. Dwayne burst out laughing, and even Cena had to chuckle. Yeah, get out of here, kid. With that, the young man stepped out into the night, his footsteps lighter, his head held a little higher. Cena and Dwayne watched him go before stepping out into the parking lot themselves. The Mustang still sat there, beaten and bruised, but it didn't matter. The important thing had already been won. Cena took a deep breath, looking around. Hell of a night. Dwayne exhaled. Yeah. And you know what? Cena raised an eyebrow. What? Dwayne smirked. I'm still getting extra fries. Cena laughed as they both turned back toward the diner, stepping inside one last time. The neon lights buzzed softly. The town was quiet, and justice had been served. Justice has been served, but the night will never be forgotten. Some lessons come the hard way, and tonight was one of them. What do you think about what happened? Did they get what they deserved? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a story like this.